Thank you, Dr. Ali. Yeah, a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So before I begin, please allow me to express my sincere gratitude to the organizer for giving me an opportunity to deliver a presentation here today. And the focus of my presentation would revolve around the question, how Indonesia's ASEAN Chairmanship in 2023 will be able to help elevate the existing ASEAN-ROK cooperation and also vice versa. So to answer this question, I think we should first take a look at what Indonesia aspires to achieve during its chairmanship. I'm sure that we would all agree that Indonesian chairmanship actually comes during a very challenging period of time. In a larger picture or wider context, the region is facing increasing pressure and also uncertainties due to the intensified US-China contention, which will be likely to continue for a foreseeable future. And meanwhile, within ASEAN itself, we also have issue with the Myanmar political conflict, where the Myanmar military has seized power since early 2021. So by putting forward the theme ASEAN Matters, epicentrum of growth, we can notice how much the Jokowi administration actually hoped for Southeast Asia to remain a stable and also a peaceful region, and at the same time to become the anchor for global stability by upholding international law, humanitarian values, and also not acting as a proxy for any party. In addition, Jakarta also expects ASEAN to emerge as a fast-growing, inclusive, and also sustainable economic region. In short, what we can see is that Jakarta wants to make sure that ASEAN remains relevant and also important. That's why ASEAN matters. But the relevancy of ASEAN is not the sole task or the only to-do list that the Indonesian government has in mind, because Jakarta also wants ASEAN to maintain Southeast Asia position as the epicenter of growth, as indicated in the theme of its chairmanship that I've mentioned earlier. And to achieve all these goals, ASEAN will need to work with all partners, including with the ROK, both at the bilateral and also multilateral level. It is very important for us to note that there is a reciprocal relations between bilateralism and also multilateralism, meaning that the enhancement in one would have corresponding reinforcing effect on the other. In simple words, it would also mean that bilateral ties between Indonesia and South Korea will serve as the essential foundation for ASEAN-ROK cooperation at the regional multilateral level. And on the other hand, multilateral progress in return will provide better prospect for greater bilateral cooperation between the two countries. Therefore, I will structure my presentation or discussion based on what we can do first at the bilateral level and then followed by what we can do through various ASEAN-led mechanisms or initiatives. At the bilateral level, as we all know, Indonesia-ROK relations has been long-standing and increasing robust in widening sectors. I would like to list now 3 main points on how we can further strengthen this bilateral collaboration between Jakarta and Seoul. So my 3 points are the element of complementarity, ROK's comparative advantages, and also Indonesia's economic diversification efforts. In terms of complementarity, Jokowi's previous Global Maritime Fulcrum or the GMF vision can be a potential platform where Indonesia's developmental aspiration converge with South Korea's recent Indo-Pacific strategy announced by President Yoon just recently, because both are development and also peace-oriented with common aim to uphold international rules-based order. And I know it is true that there are competing views on the GMF, because some might say that Jokowi's second term in 2019 is actually GMF official time of death, because he no longer explicitly referred to the GMF in his official statements. While there are also others who opine that the vision is actually still there, but it is started here and there within the bureaucracy. But the fact is that with or without the GMF, We all know that maritime dimension, including like maritime safety, maritime connectivity, as well as maritime economy and also resource management, would be the core area for collaboration between Indonesia and also ROK. And meanwhile, in terms of comparative advantages that the ROK has, the ROK actually has comparative advantage in many fields, including connectivity cooperation. This is because, unlike other countries, Seoul is able to offer its partners with a complete package or an overall partnership package, which not only guarantees the quality and also sustainability of economy, of technology, designs, and also products, but so would also be able to offer us more favorable financial terms or financing terms, higher degree of willingness in terms of tech and also knowledge transfer, as well as the element of trustworthiness and also reliability. And other than connectivity projects, Seoul actually also enjoys comparative advantage in smart city projects, something that most ASEAN countries, if not all, aspires to embark upon. And as well as 4IR technologies, where South Korea has so much to offer in assisting ASEAN in achieving a technology-driven economic development. So by leveraging on South Korea high-tech industry, like AI, auto robotics, and many more, this will actually give ASEAN an extra push to pursue other prosperity-seeking goals. For example, industrial upgrade and also economic transformation. So all these comparative advantages that Seoul have or the ROK have can actually further complement Jakarta's domestic development ambitions. And the third point would be Indonesia's own economic diversification efforts. Because Indonesia, just like any other Southeast Asian countries, we all need options and we all need different platforms to work with different partners in order to to avoid being held hostage for being over dependent on, say, China or other countries. And of course, we do acknowledge the reality that we do not expect Seoul to be an equivalent alternative to China in terms of development partnership. But we also know that the Chinese government and corporation, they're actually not doing very well in several dimensions. For example, in terms of human resource development or technology and knowledge transfer. So this is actually where South Korea can come into play and actually shine. And South Korean investment is one of the largest in Indonesia, and involving patents in such economic cooperation can actually be traced, where it is shifting slowly from mainly a manufacturing-oriented partnership to a more broad-based partnership to include infrastructure connectivity collaboration. One good example would be Seoul's investment in the LRT project in Jakarta, the light rail transit project, where the Korea Rail Network Authority, KRNA, has signed an agreement in 2017 with the city-owned construction company PT Jakarta Propertindo, or JAKPRO, for light rail project development. So based on this agreement, the KRNA will provide 500 million US dollars to finance the development of LRT linking the velodrome facility in Rawamangun in East Jakarta to Duku Atas in Central Jakarta. And besides financing the project, the KRNA will also provide free trainings to workers in order to operate and also to maintain the LRT. And in fact, just July this year, Indonesia has also extended a cooperation agreement with South Korea relating to the construction of the new capital city on Borneo Island to replace the overcrowded Jakarta. So the new agreement laid the groundwork for South Korean firms to actively contribute to the building of the capital's infrastructure, electronic government, and also smart city systems. And I believe that Seoul will definitely be able to play a very crucial role in this matter because Indonesia can actually tap into South Korea's experience in building the administrative city of Sejong, which was officially launched in 2012. And lastly, at the multilateral level, both Indonesia and also the ROK can also explore the possibility to work together in terms of middle power diplomacy, because both are middle power with wide range of converging interests and also collaborative potentials. Actually, such partnership is already in place through a partnership called MICTA, which is an informal middle power partnership between Mexico, Indonesia, South Korea, Turkey, and Australia. And the partnership is actually created in 2013. But this form of middle power should also focus on what Indonesia and South Korea can do together for the Indo-Pacific and also the Southeast Asia region. For instance, since we mentioned just now that smart city projects has been identified as one of the niche area where ROK can play a significant role, so Seoul can also heighten its participation in the ASEAN Smart City Network, Cities Network. And the Korea Smart City Open Network actually has already expressed its willingness to export its smart city expertise by establishing an international cooperation system among countries that are interested in South Korean smart city models. So in order to enhance this cooperation, I think it is important for us to establish a common policy framework on smart cities between ASEAN and also South Korea. And this framework, grounded on the objective to ease foreign private sector investment, should also include the standardization of market entry regulations. And other than smart cities, both ASEAN and also the ROK can also set their focus on maritime cooperation or collaboration on non-traditional security issues, and as mentioned by our previous speakers. So this would cover issues like cybersecurity, disaster relief, environmental protection, or even transnational crime. And cooperation in cybersecurity, for example, can also take place through ASEAN Cybersecurity Working Group under the ADMM+. I also noticed that Indonesia will also hold a few flagship events during its ASEAN chairmanship. So this would include the Indo-Pacific Infrastructure Forum and also the ASEAN Creative Economy Business Forum. So the ASEAN Creative Economy Business Forum, for instance, focuses on improving the digital economy of the region through digital transformation, especially in the creative economy sector. And a famous role model in Asia to have successfully developed its creative economy would be none other than the ROK, where the Hallyu or the Korean wave has now become a global phenomenon. Therefore, I think continuous investment and also partnership between ASEAN and also ROK in this sector will no doubt help ASEAN to further develop its creative economy in the near future. And based on the discussion above, we can conclude that closer bilateral ties between Indonesia and South Korea will definitely help Jakarta in achieving its ASEAN chairmanship goals, that is to maintain ASEAN relevancy and also the position of the region as the epicenter of growth. While Indonesia as ASEAN chair for year 2023 in turn will not only help to elevate existing Indonesia-ROK bilateral relations through various ASEAN-led mechanisms, but it will also enable South Korea in expanding its statecraft beyond its traditional security or diplomatic circle. So basically, these relations, be it bilateral or multilateral between Indonesia and ROK or between ASEAN and the ROK, is actually mutually beneficial. And I think that's all I have to say today. So with that, I'll end my presentation for this morning. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, but you are muted.
Center, Professor Effie Fitriani, to give comment or questions to any of the speakers.
Thank you, moderator, Dr. Ali, and thank you very much for all speakers. I really enjoy listening from your presentation this morning that map out the problems in our regions and also ASEAN opportunities and especially also the relation in ASEAN and Korea and how it can be used to hand in hand to respond to those challenges in our region. I am particularly interested in the presentation of the ambassador. Sorry. No, I have to find the name. Hang on. Ambassador, okay, Ambassador Derry first. Ambassador Derry, when saying that Indonesia, during the president's chairmanship next year, Indonesia would like to still, one of the relevant strength of Indonesia is its character of independent and active, bebas aktif, but this is 2.0. This is the first time I heard about this concept, 2.0. Here we go. Can you explain furthermore about this bebas aktif 2.0? And what do you think, and whether this new version, I suspect it's going to be new version of the bebas aktif, will be able to respond to those challenges already mapped out very comprehensively by Dr. Eddie, that we heard very all levels of the competition between major powers. And also to Ambassador Kwon, I'm very much interested in your presentation, especially when you mentioned by the Korean president suggests this ASEAN, Korea ASEAN Solidarity Initiative. I think this is also new for us because previously we have new Southern policy, and I wonder how different will be this Korean ASEAN solidarity with the new Southern policy. I think that's to open the discussion. Thank you. Pak Dery aja langsung Pak, jawab Pak. Si Ali moderator.
Thank you, Prof. Effie. Next one, we have Dr. Sofwan Albana, who is also going to ask a question or comments. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali, and thank you very much for the speakers for the comprehensive assessment on the challenges that will be faced by ASEAN next year. I would like to pose several questions, maybe starting with the fact that the interpretation of the Indo-Pacific continuously evolve. As Eddie mentioned, it began with more security-heavy conceptualization led by Japan, India, and the United States. But if we look at the current discourses, including in the fact that the US introduced more economic measures such as the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework and other initiatives, it seems that ASEAN's interpretation of Indo-Pacific, which is more comprehensive, more inclusive, is actually gaining ground, at least in the discursive stage. the fact that the other actors endorses ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific, whatever it means, and how sincere is that, shows that actually the discursive battleground was strongly influenced by ASEAN's conceptualization of Indo-Pacific. But the question is on how this small victory in the discursive battleground on the interpretation of Indo-Pacific could actually be translated into a more operational and concrete mechanism. How ASEAN and especially Indonesia actually plan to operationalize the ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific in Indonesia's chairmanship. I think that would be one important question. Of course, Pak Dery already outlined that it will be one of the priority of Indonesian chairmanship. But I'm wondering if Pak Dery and other speakers could elaborate on how the operationalization could be, including how it will be connected to other initiatives such as the Belt and Road Initiative, the Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative, Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, and other initiatives. Because one of the point in ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific is connecting the connectivities, right? And on the second question is, I think the only actor which is still skeptical of the conceptualization of Indo-Pacific is China. I mean, China is pretty much critical towards the use of the term Indo-Pacific because of its origins. But is there any possibility in the future that ASEAN could convince China to, rather than rejecting the concept of Indo-Pacific, engage with the concept and together with ASEAN and the US use the concept to develop a more, how to say, manageable platform for relationship between the great powers as well as ASEAN in the region. And the third question would be a small question on the speakers on the progress of the South China Sea Code of Conduct. What do you think will happen in 2023? Will it be progressing when Indonesia becoming the chairman? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sofwan. So your question is to all the speakers?
Yes.
Okay, for all the speakers. Perhaps I'm going to have to start with Ambassador Dery on the Bebas Aktif 2.0, His Excellency. What does it mean?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And also thank you, Professor Effie, for the intriguing question. I didn't know that using the term non-alignment 2.0 would trigger, especially Professor Effie in asking further. I thought you know already, and I was hoping that you could teach me more about it. So basically, the non-alignment 2.0 is a term derived from the Indian foreign policy and strategy, which was written by someone named Sunil Khilani. So this is, of course, in Indonesia's view, it does not, as such, we take this concept from the author from India, but what we are trying to put here is that basically our independent and proactive foreign policy. Of course, it remains as the very fundamental principle of our foreign policy. But with the current situation that we are facing in the global world, in our region, this independent and active foreign policy needs to be in a more proactive way, revitalized, where Indonesia should, let me put it that Indonesia is even more relevant to implement this independent and proactive foreign policy with the current situation that we are facing. So the non-alignment 2.0, of course, does not represent the non-alignment movement. That's another thing, the non-aligned movement. But the non-alignment 2.0 is basically on how to re-emphasize and reiterate and revitalize the foreign policy of an independent and active, which Indonesia has been implementing all these years. So in a sense, it is some kind of an obligation or demand for Indonesia to show more of its independent and active foreign policy with the situation that we have right now. So I think that is the basic concept, and that is how I interpret the so-called non-alignment 2.0. It does not mean that we are embarking on a new concept of foreign policy, but it's a matter of revitalizing what we have already. And with the term non-alignment 2.0, it sounds very millennial. So we're hoping that our young generation will be even more interested and even more spirited in implementing this independent and active foreign policy. So if you Google it, you will find that this is derived from the, maybe it's some kind of a white paper or a book from an Indian writer, which has been taken as a basis for India's recommendation on its foreign policy. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Ambassador Derry, but do you have any comments on ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific and how it relates to the BRI, Quad, and also about SCS Code of Conduct?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, once again, thank you very much, and also Pa Sofwan for the very interesting and relevant question and views that you have posed to this forum. We should all take note that the Indo-Pacific region, to a certain extent, the ASEAN region, where we have enjoyed a relatively above average economic growth, while everyone is declining for the last 5 years, if I may say, especially during the pandemic, where the global world has experienced decline of economic growth, while ASEAN enjoyed a relatively above average economic growth. So why is that? Perhaps it's because the dynamics of the global world is indeed in the Asia Pacific or Indo-Pacific region. And that is why also interests of countries, especially major and key players, are directed towards the Indo-Pacific region, where it is understood or well perceived that growth is from this region, which affects other region. So therefore, a lot of interest from different kind of countries, especially major powers, major countries have their interest towards this region. Well aware of this situation, ASEAN took the initiative back in beginning from the late 2011 during Indonesia's chairmanship in 2011 until 2019, around 10 years in the making. Discussion on how ASEAN perceives and views the Indo-Pacific region culminated into this ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. What we are trying to do with the AOIP is that is, of course, some kind of a reflection of ASEAN centrality, where ASEAN should maintain its central role, its leadership in our own region, including the region beyond ASEAN, which is the Indo-Pacific region. So we offered the AOIP as a concept, as a conceptual basis for cooperation and collaboration in the Indo-Pacific region. And after that, everyone can see that a lot of countries, even the Republic of Korea, have also come up with their own strategies or outlooks or views towards the Indo-Pacific region. And it's, of course, the right of every country to come up with their views and strategies, ideas on how they want to be in this dynamic region. But for ASEAN, it is clear that we are offering something that everyone shall respect and notice, recognize, and what we are offering is cooperation and collaboration for the benefit of the Indo-Pacific region, for the benefit of ASEAN and its partners who are working together under this AOIP. Of course, we would like to have all the strategies that come up with from different kind of countries or parts of the world, including other concepts like the Quad, BRI, any other cooperation schemes that people outside the ASEAN are offering, would something that complement the AOIP. It should not be in a conflicting mode. It should not be as a competition to the AOIP, but rather it's an encouragement of the keywords of cooperation and collaboration, where they complement to strengthen the existence of the AOIP in the Indo-Pacific region. So, of course, the AOIP, after its formal establishment around 2 to 3 years ago, we are taking the momentum of Indonesia's chairmanship that it's time for the AOIP to be mainstream and to be implemented. And we are going to invite our partners, ASEAN partners, whether they are dialogue partners, whether they are sectoral or development partners, or even any other interested parties who are in the Indo-Pacific region, to work together with ASEAN based on the AOIP. And this is not a new ASEAN-led mechanism, but rather using the existing led mechanism, ASEAN +1, ASEAN +3, ARF, EAS. But the main important point, if I may say, on the AOIP is that it's inclusive, but it is also open-ended. So therefore, everyone is invited, and in an open-ended sense, where it does not have to be ASEAN +1, it doesn't have to be ASEAN +3, it doesn't have to be EAS or ARF. Anyone who's interested on a certain practical cooperation can work together. For example, with the ROK, ASEAN and ROK agreed to work on an issue or practical cooperation on maritime cooperation, let's say. But then the US, China, let's say, Japan are also interested. So we can collaborate together outside the existing ASEAN-led mechanism that we have. That is the notion of the open-endedness of the AOIP. It creates the opportunity for countries to work together outside the mechanism that we already have in ASEAN. And we would also like to see that through the AOIP, our partners can work together among them, ideally between US and China, for example. Although this is some kind of a dream, but through the AOIP, we are offering that opportunity and that possibility. So I think the main theme that I want to put here on the AOIP is that the AOIP is an ASEAN concept, and we are hoping and expecting that an ASEAN concept like the AOIP will be the main concept for cooperation and collaboration in the Indo-Pacific, while the others concept or strategy will complement and strengthen the AOIP. Thank you very much.
To His Excellency Ambassador Kwan, would you care to enlighten us about the difference between KASI or AXI with the new Southern Policy Plus of the previous administration?
Okay, thank you, Professor Epi, for your comment and question. But before that, I have to say that today's session is centering around how we perceive, what we expect on Indonesia's ASEAN chairmanship next year. And my colleague, close friend, Dery Aman, ambassador, is a highly respected figure, including from me in the ASEAN community here in Jakarta. And what we hear from him today is actually the elucidation of what Indonesia is going to do next year. That included a very important philosophical and conceptual approach to the key challenges we face today, particularly what he described on AOIP is something which is difficult to obtain, from by outside the analysts or experts. He has a lot of deep-seated knowledge on the key issues and key concepts facing the ASEAN community. So I'm very happy to have another opportunity to get insights from these interactions today. Also, I'm very happy to see the 3 Korean experts who have spoken already, Professor Hwang and also Dr. Lee Jae-hyun, and also Professor Choi Kyung-hee, who will be speaking in the next session. All 3 of them are renowned experts in Korea. Professor Choi, Dr. Lee Jae-hyun, they are truly genuine experts on the ASEAN issues, as far as I know. And then Professor Hwang has been known to be the expert on the US-China rivalry and also China per se for such a long period. So I am very privileged and pleased to share time with the 3 of them. In response to the specific question from Professor Epi, what's the difference between New Southern Policy, which has been promoted by the previous Moon Jae-in Liberal government, and the new initiative under the name of KASI, Korea ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, by the new Korean administration of President Yoon Suk-yeol. The new president's team has repeatedly stated that our new approach to the region, our new approach to ASEAN will succeed key elements and many elements of a new Southern policy. Although, we respect the saying that new wine should be poured into new bag. So administration has changed. We have to be refreshing up. So try to adapt our new approach, new substance to the new era under the new name. So it turns out to be KASI, as Professor Dr. Lee Jae-hyun suggested. Maybe AXI could be the better word, meaning action in Bahasa Indonesia. But I will report your suggestion, recommendation, but I don't think we may change it because the president has already announced it publicly before the leaders of ASEAN. But KASI also carries a positive meaning. KASI itself is the head of a unit, director. But if we put H at the end of a KASI, it's kasih, meaning love, affection in Bahasa. So please take it in a positive way. The difference maybe from NSP is under the new KASI initiative, President Yoon emphasized the importance of our cooperation in the security, peace, diplomacy areas. Specifically mentioned that we will increase our contacts and collaboration with ASEAN through diplomatic channels, kind of a strategic dialogue between the foreign policy communities or foreign ministries, and also further utilization of the defense ministerial, namely ADMM plus, through which we can increase or upgrade our cooperation. So in the KASI, I think the pillar of peace and security has been highlighted and will further pursued in the future in various forms. And generally, I see more connections and more common elements. We will continue to promote, expand, strengthen, upgrade, deepen our relationship with ASEAN. So that's the spirit. And as Professor Dr. Lee Jae-hyun said, keeping the spirit of NSP means like this. We will continue what we have achieved, what we have done in good manner in the previous administrations. We'll do the same in the new administration of President Yoon Suk-yeol, but more creative manner, much bigger manner. But there will be continuation. Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency. I need to inform to the audience who are present in person at the moment in the seminar that the coffee break is eliminated, so we do not dedicate a certain particular time for coffee break. You are, however, free to get your drinks and food from the table, and but we are not going to have a 20-minute break because just to save time. So so that's okay. I'm going to move to our speaker, Professor Huang. Professor Huang, could you enlighten us more, probably to add on to what His Excellency Ambassador Kwan has spoken about, how different is KASI from the NSP, And probably you would like to comment on other questions such as the skepticism of China towards Indo-Pacific framework, and also other points in the comments from the audience. Professor Huang.
Thank you, Chairman. Just let me briefly share my ideas. U.S.-China rivalry in Indo-Pacific region first. I have found a very interesting, thing. U.S. has referred to this region as Indo-Pacific rather than Asia-Pacific. But if you go to travel to China, you all hear about the Asia-Pacific, not Indo-Pacific. So where do we live? 윤석열 government has decided to leave Indo-Pacific. Now I'm wondering, okay, the ASEAN countries, ASEAN has declared AOIP, but still still seems to be very cautious. So I'm wondering how the ASEAN move on. Then, but anyway, in the one more point, centrality, ASEAN centrality. Before we in the era of Asia Pacific, then we still find the Asia there. But now we are entering into Indo-Pacific era. Then we miss something, Asia. We see only two in Indian Ocean or India and Asia Pacific. No, Pacific. So the Asia is missing. So we have to develop our own theories, philosophy, and logic, whatever. We have to adapt new circumstance. Then there is one Chinese idiom, 마오뚱. 마오뚱 in Korean, 모순. In English, the contradiction. Contradiction, 마오뚱 means spear and a shield. There's a story. A Chinese man sold his spear and shield at the marketplace. He said his spear could break any shield, and his shield could block any spears. A bystander asked, "Why don't you break your shield with your spear?" Now, the United States shield of Indo-Pacific is trying to stop the Chinese spear to advance west using the Belt Road Initiative. It could maintain its consistency as long as there is enough political will and financial budget. If China succeeds in defeating the American effort to contain the Chinese, we might have to discuss a new term, Atlantic Pacific strategy, in the future. So anyway, in Indo-Pacific, the ASEAN is the most important stage. Then ASEAN is the central center of the marketplace and center of a battlefield. This is my analysis, current U.S.-China rivalry going on. Okay, I stop here first. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Huang. Dr. Jeon Lee, perhaps you have comments to add to the.
Yes, there was no specification directed of me, but I would like to add a couple of points regarding the concept of Indo-Pacific. Basically, the Indo-Pacific concept of a region is gaining kind of a momentum and support among the regional countries. It is a fact that the Indo-Pacific countries are economically, strategically, and socio-culturally quite linked. And of course, you can define the region whatever you want. You can say just ASEAN or Asia Pacific, East Asia, Indo-Pacific, whatever. It's all about the war between different territories and war between different constructions of a regional concept. And at the moment, I believe the Indo-Pacific concept of a region is gaining momentum in the region. That's sort of a reality. But the second point is you have to be very careful with this. In many countries, you put Indo-Pacific strategy before Indo-Pacific region. Indo-Pacific is basically a concept of a region. When you have your own vision and your own idea about region, then you can create Indo-Pacific strategy of your own. So first, you have to define your own Indo-Pacific regions, vision and idea. Then you can come up with your own Indo-Pacific strategy. Don't put someone's Indo-Pacific strategy before your own definition of Indo-Pacific region. That's my second point. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jeon Lee. Bapak Edi, sorry, I skipped you. Perhaps you want to add some comments, especially about the SCS Code of Conduct. Perhaps you can enlighten us something about that.
Well, this very sensitive issue, to be honest, South China Sea, I mean COC. Well, up until now, I think one of the criticism addressed to ASEAN during the latest summit was that it didn't talk much actually, about the real issues, on the ground, and especially in this context is code of conduct in the South China Sea, and how ASEAN is going to cope with the so-called, of course, we already very familiar with, is the US-China, rivalry. This is actually one of the criticism. And of course, the third one is the issue of Myanmar. South China Sea, the conduct of code of conduct in the South China Sea, I think there are 4 issues now, Masofan. Yeah. The first one is the parties concerned are still debating what is the definition of territory. As the basic and the starting point, when we are talking about South China Sea Code of Conduct, including which area. Is that all South China Sea or just disputed area? So this is one of the issue. Secondly is the definition, not definition, whether or not it's going to be legally binding or just a political declaration. And of course, China, have been against, any statement that is legally binding, because China is not, how do you call it? They always, don't want to use UNCLOS, when they claim the so-called, the Chinese territory, the South China Sea, is on 9 dash line. It goes against, UNCLOS definition of, maritime boundaries or whatever you call it. The third one is the issue of the involvement of the third party, meaning that we do not want to have, for example, the China to have the final say to decide, whether ASEAN can invite somebody to have, collaborations or cooperation in the South China Sea. So we do not want China to have the final say in this context. So that's in the third issue. And the fourth issue, of course, is, and this is very interesting, actually, the fourth one, because in the past, it was our friends from the West, who pushed actually ASEAN to conclude code of conduct, but not now anymore. Why? Because they fear that code of conduct in the South China Sea, will create a particular maritime regime, beyond UNCLOS or going against UNCLOS. So if they have the specific arrangement, they feel that it's not going to be, in line with UNCLOS. So this is the four concerns, expressed, by either ASEAN at some points or, by external powers, who are closely, watch the situation and also have the interest, in the South China Sea. So that is the problem now. And my personal recommendation is don't hurry too much. I think we need to have more negotiation with China in order to have, what is that, a more comprehensive and better, arrangements, in this particular issue. I'm tempted to talk about OIP because this is really very interesting. And again, I have to recall, that the first idea of Indo-Pacific in the current context was actually from the US. If we are talking about the security issues, of course, Abe and India, and Modi at the time, they are more inclined, to the so-called economic perspective. But when the term, was familiarized, popularized, socialized among the countries in the region, is very much security. The word Indo is not Indonesia. The word Indo was actually designed of the US to bring India in the picture of strategic contestation with China. I still remember a statement made by, I forgot actually whether it is Condoleezza Rice or Hillary Clinton, but I still remember her statement. US is going to help India counter China. That is the statement, the first one. I still remember that sentence. So that's why China is very reluctant. Russia is very reluctant. Why? Because in the eyes of China, Indo-Pacific concept is containment. To Russia, Indo-Pacific conception is exclusion. So to China is containment, to Russia it is exclusion. So this way, from the very beginning, it is contested. And there has been a debate, on that particular issue. So that's why ASEAN come up with very, very typical ASEAN way, stance, or whatever you call it. Let me give you 3 points here. Actually, I put it on my slides. I forgot actually slide number 4 or number 3. ASEAN concerns. Since the very beginning, because we realized that this is contested concept. So ASEAN concern is we do not want to be the instrument of any proxy war. Launched by external power. This is ASEAN concern when we are talking about Indo-Pacific, because there are so many ideas and initiatives. So ASEAN do not want to be a proxy war by any external powers. That's the first one. Secondly, We do not want to create distrust among all countries, yeah, in the region. And thirdly, ASEAN concern is we have to take the lead. We have to take the lead. So this is the 3 points of it. So that's why ASEAN initiative, on Indo-Pacific, if I, maybe frankly and openly, is very minimalist. Very minimalist to be very inclusive. If you look at the 4 principles, I think it's very clear. First one, the 2 oceans are interconnected. Well, everybody knows it. But what is the meaning of it? Interconnected. Even the undergraduate student, they do understand that the 2, oceans are connected. But so it's very loose, actually. The second one, our interaction must be based on cooperation, not rivalry. Of course, it's very ideal, right? And the third one, we stress on development instead of rules, instead of values. Because when we are talking about rules and values, people can ask, whose rules, whose values? So that's why the third point or third principles of Indo-Pacific is the stress on development. And the fourth one is the so-called maritime domain. So this is very typical ASEAN. This is what do you call it? ASEAN way. Try to be inclusive, neutralize, and so on and so forth. Now, let me go back to the. So, what is the future? Well, the challenge by ASEAN or even by Indonesia chairmanship, when we are talking about AO, because in the statement, latest development is there are so many mentions, yeah, about the future collaboration between ASEAN and external powers and how to implement ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific. Of course, including how we are going to develop, our cooperation with, Republic of Korea. But let me take just one aspect, yeah. And this is the challenge actually, how to elaborate the 4 areas: maritime cooperation, economic cooperation, SDGs, and connectivity. This is the 4 areas of what is that, OAP, right? Let me take just one example, maritime cooperation. How can we elaborate maritime cooperation? And this is my elaboration when I was asked by one of the ministries in Indonesia. Okay, maritime cooperation. What is the substance? Resource, route, power projection, or sovereignty? Because each have their own interests. When we are talking about maritime cooperation, in terms of resources, our interest is national asset and economic development, right? So what is the initiative? Exploration natural resources, environment protection, combating illegal activities. And what to do, area of cooperation, transparency, early warning, capacity building, and so on and so forth. Now let's go to the second point. Maritime cooperation in terms of route. What is our interest? Access and safety. And what is the initiative? Surveillance, patrolling, early warning, info sharing, combating transnational crime, and so on and so forth. So when we are talking about maritime cooperation in terms of power projection and sea power, what is our interest? Deterrence, hegemony, dominion, anti-access, area denial. Initiative, surveillance, military. So which part, which element are we talking about when we are mentioning the so-called maritime cooperation in the context of AOIP? So this is just one aspect. What about economic development? What about SDGs? What about digital economy? Are we going to talk about the establishment of digital regime or sharing technology, capacity technology? That's different. Because we have the regime norms, from the UN, we have a benchmark from the European Union, and so on and so forth. So this is actually our homeworks, Excellency. There are so many things that we still, even during the Indonesian chairmanship, I think the issue will still there, and we will give homeworks to next chairman of ASEAN. So thank you very much.
Thank
Lots
you.
of love.